Hi and welcome to SuperCard. I'm Matt and I've got an exciting video for you today. This is actually the very final or the very last video in the Gallardo build series. So I'll show you all the last bits of footage from when I assembled the bits and pieces for the engine bay. There's just like a couple of covers that go either side of the engine bay to make it look all tidy, and the airbox and a few other bits and pieces like that. So I'll assemble all those bits and pieces, fit them to the engine bay, fit the engine cover back on, put the rear bumper back on and the rear wheels. And and the Gallardo will be completely finished. So let's get started and finish the Gallardo. In the last video, when I put the engine and transmission into the car, the fit was almost perfect, but there was one very small issue where the engine mount bushes weren't quite tall enough to reach the mounts on the rear lower frame. So I just removed the engine and transmission once more to fix that. It's an easy fix. I just glue a spacer to the bottom of each engine mount bush. The spacer is just made from several discs of thick black card, which I've cut out with my circle cutter and glued together. So you can see now that the engine mount bushes are just a bit taller than they were before. Next, I'll assemble a bunch of engine bay components. I'd spent several months in my spare time carefully prototyping, iterating and testing all the various parts. Let's take a quick look over my Adobe Illustrator file that I created. The first page contains plans for a cross member, which will support the airbox. The second page contains parts for the airbox itself. Page 3 has more airbox parts. Page 4 contains the plans and instructions for constructing 2 air intake pipes. This page contains some firewall components. Page 6 shows parts for a heat shield structure. These pages document parts for 2 covers, which will fit either side of the engine, as well as the coolant reservoir cap. In the last 2 pages, I just have some plans for some various components such as drive shafts, the oil filler assembly, and the power steering fluid reservoir. What I'll do is print out the plans on my A4 black and white printer and then trace those by hand with my craft knife, cutting them out of sheets of various craft boards. Alright, so the first thing I'll glue together is a component which I'll fit to the firewall in the engine compartment. This one's pretty straightforward. It's basically just a foam board piece, and I'll just glue a few other details made from card onto that. Then I'll glue it to the firewall like this. Next, I'll assemble a heat shield panel, and this will get glued in position towards the rear of the engine compartment. The surface of the final piece needs to be glued down in a particular order, and I made this guide in Illustrator to demonstrate the specific sequence. And that way I compress the shape of the silver metallic card piece to match the different contours of the surface of the base component that I'm gluing it to. I use a book to press the part flat while it dries in between each step. And now the finished heat shielding is ready to be fitted to the car. Now I'll assemble the airbox. Next, I'll glue together the oil cap and the filler pipe, which will attach to the side of the airbox. I've made the top of the airbox removable, and that makes positioning the air intake pipes easier. And there's the completed airbox, with the oil cap and filler tube attached. I'm going to make the air intake pipes now. Cut a bunch of rings like this out of thick black 1000 GSM poster board with my circle cutter. These will get glued to the outside of the pipe, and I've cut the ring at one point to allow for variations in the pipe's diameter. They should slide on and fit pretty snugly in place like this. You can see one of the completed intake pipes over on the right, and I'll just use that as a reference for the second intake pipe, which I'm making now, so that I can get all the outer ring details spaced exactly the same. I'll make sure the gaps and joins are aligned along one side of each intake pipe, and I'll point that seam where all the joins are downwards when I fit these to the car, so you won't be able to see them at all. here are both intake pipes, done and ready to be fitted to the engine. The next components to assemble are two aesthetic covers which sit either side of the engine on a real Gallardo. Make the engine bay look tidier and hide all the various unsightly pipes and cables and wires, etc. The coolant reservoir cap sits on one of those covers, so I'll make that now too.
track, can I let it go? We're running from the past, wanting to be sure. Chaos in my mind, constant deja vu. But every time, it comes back to you.
There are the two finished engine bay covers. These parts here, these will become the power steering fluid reservoir. The last thing I'm going to assemble for the engine bay is this engine bay cross member or structural support bar, and the airbox will actually attach to this. This one is pretty simple. It's just made up of a couple of pieces that I've cut from foam core board, and then there are some strips of black light card to finish off a few of the visible foam board edges. Now I'm ready to refit the engine and transmission back into the car, and it shoehorns back into place, just like the real thing. The first step of the final engine bay assembly is to fit the 2 rear axles. These are simply 2 lengths of black plastic drinking straw, where the flexible bendy parts represent the rubber CV joint boots on the real car. Then I can fit the airbox to the cross member I assembled just a minute ago. It pushes securely into place with tabs and slots at each end. Easy. I can glue the power steering reservoir in place now, and I've made a few small marks on the top of the cross member, so I know exactly where it should be mounted. Next, the intake pipes slide into position, and one end slides over the throttle bodies, and the other end just kind of slides and aligns nicely into the airbox. Then the top of the airbox can be fitted, and with a few tweaks to the alignment of the intake pipes, everything should line up and sit pretty nicely. The 2 aesthetic covers can now be fitted, one either side of the engine bay. Each cover has one large tab at the front, which fits into the firewall, and another large tab in the side, which pushes into the engine bay side apron area. Now I can refit the engine cover, and the engine bay is finally complete. The very last components I made for the Gallardo build were the 2 rear wheel houses, or fender liners. There's a louvered panel cut into each wheelhouse, and it just requires a bit of folding like this. Cool, so there's both the rear wheelhouses complete. They were a little bit tricky to fit, the space is pretty tight, and I kind of just had to wrangle them into place. Now I just need to refit the rear wheels. And the rear bumper. And the Gallardo is completely finished. Yes, so there we go, that's the Gallardo build completely finished. It was an absolutely epic project. I spent I think like several years of my spare time working on it. So countless hours, literally like blood, sweat and tears went into it. It's crazy, but I really, really love the process and I really like the end result. So the build that you see behind me here has ended up consisting of 3,316 individual little parts. But because I had to like conceptualize and prototype and iterate each little piece over and over to get it just right, I would have cut and made like many times that over in parts overall. But yeah, super looking forward to getting stuck into the next build, which I'll be announcing in the next video. So make sure you come and check that one out. Thanks for watching. If you've got any comments, drop a comment below or send a question to matt@supercardmodels.com or DM me on Instagram. And again, thanks for following along. Thanks for watching this series. It's been super epic. But as I say, really looking forward to starting a new, fresh build in the next video. So yeah, I'll see you then. Bye.